Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Sharon Florentine. Welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar, The Perfect Storm, Reshaping MDR, brought to you by Open Systems. We have an awesome webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some quick housekeeping items with you. First, please remember that this webinar is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of it, you'll be able to go back and watch it again. We will send you an email with instructions for accessing the webinar on demand, or you can always visit us at securityboulevard.com/webinars, and it will be there for you as well. We are taking questions throughout the presentation, so if you've got anything on your mind, feel free to use the Q&A tab on your console. Send those questions over to us. We will try to get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Finally, stick around because we're doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So stick around, as I said, to see if you are a winner. Finally, there's a handout for you available for you. You can download that. Just go to the handouts tab, pull that down. Got some really good reading for you there. And we have a really great presentation. I'm pleased to introduce Tom Korn, the Chief Product Officer with Open Systems. And I'm going to turn my camera and mic off. And Tom, I'm going to let you get right into it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here today. I'm actually here live from our Security Operations Center in Redwood, California. We have a terrific session today. We're going to cover a few topics that are big questions that we're getting a lot from a lot of our clients around what's shifting in the threat landscape and what's changing. What are some of the most significant challenges that organizations are facing when it comes to detecting and responding to modern attacks? From a process perspective, from a technology perspective, and from a people perspective. So I'll dive right in. I think you'll find this a meaty topic, and hopefully will generate a lot of good thinking and discussion from it. As the title suggests, this really is a perfect storm today of three forces that are making this an extraordinarily significant issue. One, of course, is threat landscape. Threat landscape is always evolving, of course, but I think two particular parameters here. One is the weaponization of cyberspace that's making this difficult. By this, I mean that the ability to create sophisticated attacks used to be relegated to highly sophisticated attackers. But today, the tooling that's available enables really average hackers to do some very sophisticated attacks, and that's escalating the number, the quantity, and the significance of the attacks. But also the shift from malicious software, malware, if you will, to the increasing prevalence of malicious use of legitimate software. And I'll get into that in a moment. Another force that's reshaping this landscape is just sheer complexity. I would argue that complexity has become as significant a threat in cyber as the attacks themselves. Organizations have so many tools, so many alerts, so many new surfaces to protect, and they're facing with far too little context to really work with, and teams are very siloed. And I'm going to cover this in a bit more in just a moment. And the third force here is just a real shortage on talent. This is a highly specialized skill set, and the difficulty in attracting and retaining the talent necessary to really drive this type of activity in organizations has become a really substantial challenge. And let me start with the weaponization of cyberspace. Beyond the tools that are available, the whole model of the threat landscape is changing. For a long time, we were really dealing with malware, if you will, as a metaphor, bombs. New malware shows up that we have to uncover and detect using various techniques, started with signatures, moved into behavioral and AI approaches. But what is changing very substantially is the shift to non-malware attacks, living off the land attacks, if you will. And the model here, if you will, is a van that's being weaponized by driving into a crowd of people, right? The whole model shift. This isn't so much about how do I find a van. This isn't a van I've seen before. What's important is how the asset is being used. And these are the kinds of things that we're seeing today. And it's hacks. It's not a piece of malware. It's using PowerShell to scrape an LSAS directory to harvest credentials, so that it becomes far more challenging. It's not about, hey, I've discovered PowerShell in your environment. It's how is PowerShell being used in your environment. Another factor here is the context question. And by this, I mean, we've always had a lot of context about threats, and that's getting better and better all the time. What we've often lacked in this industry is context about what you're defending. It's one thing when everything resolves to an IP address, but what is that IP address? Is this an important asset or not an important asset? What is the user that's on that? What does it connect to? What things are dependent on it? What application or data does that support? That is critical to making security decisions. And in the absence of it, there's an expression: you can't secure what you don't understand, and I think that is incredibly true. And that's one of the things making this difficult. A third factor is just this expanding threat attack surface. Right. Obviously, we're not dealing in an era with corporate laptops inside campuses connecting to data centers. And certainly the pandemic has exacerbated this phenomenon, but this has been going on for a long time. We're dealing with someone's personal iPhone or mobile device connecting to Salesforce or Workday, or to an application built on a Kubernetes cluster currently running on Azure or some other infrastructure as a service. Increasingly, we're faced with, how do we secure things that are running on environments that we don't directly manage, own, and control in a very broad sense? Where do we install controls? How do we get the visibility and telemetry? This has become a huge complicating factor. Finally, the sheer number of tools that we're dealing with is incredibly overwhelming. Security is a startup industry. It's highly innovative. If there's a new threat or new operational issue, there'll be a group of people who come up with a really novel approach to how they could solve that problem. There will be venture capital and other things to fund that. But what that's left us with is thousands of highly specialized tools and vendors. The average organization owns between 50 and 100 security products, which is just an astounding number. There's a statistic from Gartner that 90% of breaches are leveraging misconfiguration and misalignment of these controls, which basically the complexity has become as much of the problem as the attacks themselves. So as we look to solve this problem, security is really a set of course, of processes that we need to do. Processes to predict where we have risk. We scan for vulnerabilities. We look at configurations. We baseline systems. That feeds another set of processes to prevent and shrink the attack surface. How do we patch? How do we configure? How do we isolate or segment? How do we deploy anti-malware technology? Intrusion prevention technology. That feeds another set of processes around when prevention fails. How do we detect, investigate, and correlate, understand the extent of the problem, of course, which feeds a final piece, which is how do we respond? How do we contain that? How do we clean that? And how do we learn from it? Like, defense in depth was never supposed to mean throw a whole bunch of stuff at it and hopefully something catches it. It really was supposed to be a mature set of processes that have different failure modes, right? When I do everything I can to shrink my attack surface, if you will, reduce the attack surface. But when that fails, I need to be in a position to defend the attack surface. And this should also be a continuous process, because I should be learning from things I've defended against to reevaluate how I'm reducing the attack surface, so I'm not fighting the same battles over and over again. We think about this in terms of missions, if you will, jobs to be done, processes that we need to do in a consistent, repeatable manner over and over again. But of course, this is hard. This is very, very hard stuff, right? When you think about how attacks really happening, and I'm not talking about a piece of spam or phishing or piece of malware running that often we're in a position to prevent. When we're dealing with real attacks that get past our prevention, we're dealing with a sophisticated set of people, processes, and technology on the other side, on our adversaries, right? For example, breaking into an organization starts with recon. How do I understand where the information I want or the systems I want to get access to? Who are the people that run that? I might look at LinkedIn to see who in a particular company has those jobs, right? Right. I need an attack vector, which I develop myself, or as I mentioned earlier, with the weaponization of cyberspace, I can buy or rent malware or other types of attack vectors. And that gets me to my primary attack. That could be phishing. It could be water holing, which is a technique of compromising local facilities in a community where employees of that company I'm trying to get into might go to, the school systems, etc. But that gives me access into one of those systems. Once I get in, I'm installing a command and control infrastructure, basically software that I have visibility into your environment and control of my position. And in order to maintain persistence, I'll probably install a couple of strains of this command and control infrastructure, some of which I'll put to sleep, and one of which I activate, and I start using this to escalate my privileges on those systems and start to move laterally to other systems in the environment, mapping out and gaining more substantial position in the environment. As I move, I'm wiping my tracks. I'm getting rid of my logs, right? I'm I'm cleaning my position and I'm staying stealthy. My goal here is not to make a lot of noise. My position is to get myself to the point where I can either steal information or disrupt or install ransomware on the right systems, right? If you detect me during this attack, um, I'm often in a position to react to that, right? I'll see that you've wiped me off your systems and what sort of gave that away, and I'll modify my strain B so I don't use the same mechanisms, and I start using strain B to maintain persistence in the environment. All of this is aimed at giving me time to find the information that matters, find the systems that matter, steal data, ransomware lock systems, disrupt systems. If it's stealing data, it's parceling it into smaller pieces, exfiltrating, and then cleaning up my tracks, right? This is the kinds of things that we're dealing with. It is targeted. It is interactive. This isn't just an automated piece of software. There's a human on the other end working this, and it is stealthy, right? And we spend so much of our time and money buying products and spending time on the prevention, trying to do the things to prevent intrusion. And that's important. It's very important. But we often have far too few abilities to be able to react to when something gets by. And it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when. There isn't a silver bullet to prevent all things from happening. So this is where a lot of organizations struggle. And the key is, how do we reduce the dwell time so that even if someone gets in, I can still stop critical data from leaking out. I can stop critical systems from being destroyed or disrupted. That's really the task here. The challenge, as always in cyber, boils down to people, process, and technology, right? Most organizations really aren't staffed for the kinds of skill sets and tool sets that are needed to do this kind of thing and do it 24/7, 7 days a week, right? They often don't have the right processes in place. Organizations often have more mature compliance processes, but very often we go into organizations and we see the detection is best described as firefighting, which is not the right place to be able to solve this problem. And from a technology perspective, there's a really heavy emphasis on leveraging the same preventive technologies and preventive telemetry in the detection and response cycle, and it's a real mismatch, right? If the preventive technology had the right signals for detection and investigation, they probably do better at being able to prevent those things in the first place, right? It's a bit of a mismatch, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But I'll start with the people side of it, right? Part of the challenge here is this is a highly sought after skill set and group, and I'm sure you're all experiencing that, right? There's a recent study that just came out from the Information Systems and Security Association, and they did a study in conjunction with the Enterprise Strategy Group, that the cyber skills crisis has been really going from bad to worse. And today, more than half of organizations today are highly impacted by this. It is very difficult to find these skill sets. There are millions of open positions. This is a really hard thing. And remember, in an organization, it's not like just getting one person. I need to be able to cover my organization around the clock. And so this is a real piece of the challenge, right? And it's also often not core to the business, right? There are things that are more operational in nature that are important, how you operationalize policy. But the skill sets for detection, threat hunting, investigations, that's very difficult to do. The actual task is hard. It's not about finding a couple of footsteps in the snow that are sticking out. It looks more like this, right? This is a very complex process and set of skills and set of techniques to do this kind of work. And going back to that sort of flow chart to get a sense of the job to be done here, like the mission of doing detection and response. First, to even set up the program, you know, the right way to do it is to define a playbook. And then based on that playbook, to identify the kinds of data and the kinds of context that you're going to need to be able to run those plays. I often talk about security is a data problem. And you know, we often, because of this, look to collect all the data that we could possibly collect, and hopefully whenever I then figure out later how I might use that data, be able to sift through it, and I'll always have the right data. There's some logic to the thinking. The problem is it buries us in a sea of information, a lot of which is not useful or not in the right format for a security investigation. I liken it to going to the grocery store when you're hungry, right? The right way to think about it is plan your meals for the week and then think about the food that you're going to want to buy to go to do it. You need to define a security process and playbook for detection and response, and think about the kinds of data and context you're going to need to support those decisions. Then you need to think about the tooling you have in place. There is context like threat intelligence and asset intelligence. What are these infrastructure, applications, users? But then I need the right kind of telemetry to conduct investigations. And then from there, right, it's setting up the processes for detection and investigation and response and remediation. Right? This is a set of processes you're going to run over and over and over in a consistent manner. That's the way this gets done efficiently and effectively, so that you can run this 24/7. Once you have this in place, that process is going to be in this cycle of monitoring for suspicious behavior. Again, we're talking about when prevention fails, monitoring for suspicious behavior, validating that, and then using that to map out the campaign. This is important. In detection and response, you're not dealing with a compromised asset. You're dealing with a compromised organization, a compromised environment. You need to understand everything involved. It's like getting cancer. You can't cut out a little bit of cancer. You have to cut out all of it. Otherwise, you still are dealing with the same disease. Once you map out that, you have to think about the remediation options. Right? You want to make sure the cure isn't worse than the disease. You're not killing a bunch of systems while you're trying to clean this out. And then you have to validate this is done, because remember, we're dealing with an interactive attacker. So making sure that you really kick them out of the environment is a really key part of the process. Clearly, this is a different process and mission than prevention and the kinds of things in just operationalizing policy. And that's key. Doing this well is key to reducing the dwell time in the environment and learning from the attack so that you can adjust your prevention. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the technology piece, right? What as often we see in organizations is they're looking to a lot of their preventive controls, their firewalls and their secure web gateways and AV and intrusion prevention systems. They're looking to those same controls for the telemetry for their detection and investigations and funneling that up to a SIEM. And this has never worked, right? I think this model has been useful for compliance and log management, but has never really proven very effective at how do I deal with really a proper detection and investigation program. What has happened over the last several years that is very significant is the advent of EDR, endpoint detection and response. And the best way to describe this technology is think of it as putting a camera in every room in the building, recording all of the activity, being able to spot suspicious activity in the rooms and quickly be able to ask the question, show me every room where I have this going on. Help me rewind the camera so I can see what led up and what's happened since. And that has really enormously changed the entire field of security and how security is done and how detection and investigations are done. It's like having real-time forensics, if you will, going on across all of the endpoints and all of the workloads in the environment. That has led to the advent of NDR, network detection and response. This is the cameras in the hallways. And you can think of, well, now that I have the cameras in the hallways, I might see suspicious movement in the hallway and then say, well, what rooms did they go into and where have they gone? Or I might find the suspicious activity in one of the rooms or the endpoints and then say, well, what hallway did they come down to get into this room? And of course, you can think about this going all the way to identity and thinking about, well, what codes are they putting in the door? Have I seen suspicious activity and people trying to put codes to get into doors? Where have those codes been used elsewhere in the buildings? This concept starts to move across all elements of this framework. The important piece is how we connect the dots now between these. Because remember, there is no such thing as an endpoint attacker or a network attacker or a cloud attacker. There are attackers, and they're not attacking an endpoint. What they're trying to attack is applications and data. And that is accessible across all of these elements, right? I might harvest a credential in order to get on your endpoint, in order to get to a workload, to move across the cloud, move across the network. This is the problem. So the idea of expanding EDR to NDR to the identity side and now to what is often called XDR, extended detection and response. But this isn't about getting the old firewall alerts and IPS alerts and correlating them. This is getting the primary telemetry of the activity that's happening on here, finding suspicious behavior. Remember, this has occurred after it got past the firewall, after it got past the IPS. Find the suspicious activity and be able to conduct an investigation to find the full extent of this. Now, how does that fundamentally change the picture? Well, starting with the detective controls, the way we've approached it, for example, is we've built a platform called Mission Control. We run missions on it, which are, think of these as apps or workflows or process, a consistent process for how you do detection and investigation or how you do incident response, right? These missions are playbooks which can run both automated elements and also have a global SOC team that is interacting with this information, is collecting the information from these detective controls to conduct that kind of an investigation. Now, there is certainly complementary information. Preventive controls are useful complementary information and alerts to that, but not the primary source. The detective controls are the primary source. And the other thing that's really important is the asset context. Who is this user? What is that infrastructure component? What is that app? Right? Understanding which assets are more critical than others. What are the dependencies? What assets are dependent on that asset? You know, what and vice versa. That context needs to be collected, parsed, and enriched for the missions to be able to run appropriately. But it starts with the playbooks for detection and response. That dictates the kind of information and context you want to collect and enrich, and we're able to run that in a consistent manner. And if there's a lot of elements that can be automated to run quickly, but it's also critical to have the right expertise on the other end of the line. And for us, our global SOC, we have security operations. I'm standing inside our Redwood City Security Operations Center. We have another one in Zurich, Switzerland. We have another one in Honolulu, Hawaii. But the ability to have that kind of skill set around the globe so that we can follow the sun on it, that's the concept. This is how we are approaching this today. Now, the challenge, of course, is this really has to be customized and conformed to your organization and how it works. And the way we've done this in a way that can be very powerful is for us to constrain this a bit. And one of the ways that we've constrained this is we have really focused on becoming the world's experts around the Microsoft E5 security controls. So for us, we're really working with organizations that have or are buying the Microsoft E5 license. That gives them a very specific set of security controls, which means that we know you have that in place. We can connect directly to that. We are experts at exactly what the telemetry sources from those E5 security controls, what those things can do. And so we can fine tune our missions to that. And we complement that with network instrumentation that you wouldn't normally get from those controls. And that's the way we've approached really getting very specific of the kind of information and not having to add more security tools into the environment, but leverage what people already have. And that's key. The goal here is the process and this repeatable runbook and playbook. It's not the security tools. In fact, our battle cry here is no more security tools. We don't need more security tools. What we need is repeatable security missions to be able to do this in a consistent, best practice manner. Doing these processes in a consistent, more mature manner, right? It has huge impacts. And in fact, this has been studied. This data is not from us. This is actually from Accenture. Over the last several years, Accenture has been doing this State of Cyber Resilience report where they have been studying organizations at different maturity levels of these processes and seeing what the benefits accrue to the organizations that do this in a more mature manner. And they're really compelling. They're 4 times better at stopping attacks. They're 4 times better at finding breaches faster, reducing that dwell time. They're 3 times better at fixing breaches faster, again, reducing the impact of this, and ultimately 2 times better at just reducing the breach impact. It's a very interesting report. I'd suggest you take a look at that. But there's enormous benefits to doing this. Now, again, there are challenges. Do I have the right people? Do I have the right processes? But there are approaches to this that can make it very easy to move from where you are today to get that. Again, our approach of really dealing with the Microsoft tool set, the Microsoft infrastructure, enables folks who happen to be using the E5 security controls to really achieve this in a matter of weeks. So it is very achievable to have a sizable difference in your approach to this in a very short amount of time. A short word on us, Open Systems. We are delivering services across the globe, and almost every country in the world is using our technology. We follow the sun 24/7 by running security operations centers in California, where I'm sitting today, in Zurich, Switzerland, and Hawaii. We have technology of ours deployed in over 9,000 deployments, over 3 million users. We have incredible high net promoter scores, the kind of satisfaction in the work that we do. I've personally never been a part of a company that's had a net promoter score of 68, which still astounds me when I see it. But it's in part just abstracting away of the complexity of the security controls and really focusing on what you're really ultimately trying to do. What is that security mission, that mission of detection and response? And really come at it at a very prescriptive and thoughtful manner. And it's a real change, candidly, in how security is done. And that's been reflected in a lot of the comments from our customers around the world. Our ability to find things that they didn't even know were problems, our ability to elevate the maturity of the level of the organization in a matter of weeks and not have it to find the right kind of staff to do it, to really bring the maturity of process, but also the infrastructure and automation to not have to go through a whole change management process and install new technology. And that's really substantial. There's a lot of ways to learn more. If this is a topic that's interesting to you, you can read more about it. We actually just finished conducting some research with Forrester. They have a TEI report. I believe that stands for Total Economic Impact. They've studied in interviewing many of our customers of their approaches and what has been the economic impact, where have they seen benefits and savings and those types of things. I believe that has been uploaded so that you can download it directly from this webinar. If not, we will be sending that out to everyone who has attended. Of course, at our website, there's a greater opportunity to take a look at other white papers. I had given my Twitter account at the front of this, and at the real Tom Horn. Would love to engage in a conversation about this. And candidly, if we can help, if you're looking at these types of things, we do engage, in helping organizations even assess where they're sitting today and what are the opportunities. And we would love to help if there's any way we can help and bring to you the kinds of benefits that we've brought to organizations around the world. I hope this is helpful. I'm going to open it up for some questions. I did have a couple things that sort of popped up as I'm going through this. One was, let me just bring, hold on a second. I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to go on to here and switch to the camera. I think that's now broadcasting my screen. Sharon, you'll tell me if I got this wrong, but hopefully I have the right going on here.
You got it right. I can see both our faces now.
Fantastic. I'm fast becoming an expert here. Okay, so one question that's popped up is this. I've made mention of playbooks and missions versus products. So I hope that concept is clear, right? The difference between a product and a playbook and a mission. I mean, if you think about vulnerability management, I can buy a vulnerability management product, and it helps me do certain things. But the process or mission of managing vulnerabilities is a lot bigger than just what any product does for me, right? I use the product to scan the environment to get vulnerabilities, but I have to make a whole series of decisions in that process. First of all, that vulnerability, whose asset is that? Is that an important asset? What things are dependent on that asset? That'll impact my remediation options. Can I schedule downtime from that? If I take that offline or change it, how do I have to think about the testing of the patch for that? What kind of compensating controls can I put in place while I'm testing the patch for that? How do I verify or validate it? I'm coordinating multiple teams. The security team is testing and validating the vulnerabilities. The IT organization is patching. That's the difference between a product and a mission. And we really have to get clarity on this, because this is the biggest problem in security right now, is fixating too much on the product as opposed to the process and the playbook, right? That's why I keep saying it. This has got to be the end of security tools. We really have to start thinking about security process and these repeatable missions that we can do in a consistent manner. That's the only way we're going to be able to really elevate the level of cybersecurity. See one other question here, just clarity on, I made some comments about SIEM and the challenges in SIEM. There's a lot of value in a lot of the SIEM technology. In fact, for us, we actually leverage Azure Sentinel as a piece of technology, particularly for how we're collecting a lot of the information. My main comment there is the model of using SIEM here. The old model of thinking, I'm going to collect a bunch of secondary information again, I'm referring to all the alerts and events, particularly coming from my firewalls and my secure web gateways and my intrusion prevention systems, never worked as a detection and investigation model. I found, historically, SIEM have been definitely valuable in log management and definitely valuable in compliance. The problem has been, part of it is also the information you're operating and the types of analysis you're doing on it. But again, the reality of an investigation is that prevention technology has failed to prevent something. I need to be able to spot suspicious things. I need to quickly figure out, show me everywhere that's happening. Rewind the cameras to see, how did they get to that point? What's happened since? I not only need to be able to validate this activity, right, which is difficult as more and more of it is not just malware, but malicious use of legitimate software. But then I need to understand this full extent of the campaign. I need to see the full causality chain so that I can operate on the campaign as opposed to, right? Think of, I know there's an overuse of the metaphors and security of medical metaphors, but someone has the symptoms of cancer. I need to really understand I have cancer, and I need to see the full extent of the cancer. Otherwise, I actually am not treating the patient. I'm symptomatically dealing with part of the problem, and they still have cancer and it's spreading. That's the kind of approach and thinking we have to take in security, and that doesn't get solved by correlating the alerts I'm getting from a bunch of security products, right? I actually need the right telemetry and analytics to spot suspicious behavior and map that campaign. That's been the big shift to EDR and now XDR. And the value of the alerts is more a complementary function. I would say it's moved from being the top priority to being the third priority. First, give me the detective telemetry of XDR. Second, give me the context of my assets, the applications, the infrastructure, and the people. Then the alerts from those things are useful in adding color. But don't lose sight of those playbooks and processes that I have to run in a consistent manner. So I hope that's helpful. Let me just see if there were any other questions. I think those are all that have come in so far.
Tom, here's one. And this is kind of pretty basic, and but I'll throw it out here anyway. If you don't have a playbook, how would you go about putting one together? Like, where would you start? What would you put in it? I guess is the follow-up.
It's a great question. The starting points for most folks are to look at the standards boards, right? NIST has a set of processes that they suggest going on the best practices. My challenge with a lot of them is they're often sometimes verge on being academic and hard to operationalize. And then ultimately you need to customize this process for what controls you happen to be using.
Right.
That's why I said for us, the way we've tried to I think our effectiveness in solving this problem has come from two things. Picking a specific approach, right? There are many ways to do this wrong. There are several ways to do this right. We have picked a set of processes that we know work very well. They're consistent with best practices, and we run them over and over again. The other thing for us is to shrink the variability and get really good at a very specific control set. That's why for us, we've specialized in the Microsoft E5 security suite. Microsoft in the last, 5-10 years have done some extraordinary progress on the security front. I mean, it's so unfathomably different to me than when I know Microsoft from a decade ago. And I spent years as an executive at RSA and at Carbon Black, VMware. Microsoft has come a long way, and now these controls are so accessible, and so many organizations around the world are big Microsoft customers already with Office and Azure, etc. And their security controls run not just on the Microsoft infrastructure, they run on Linux, they run on Macs, they run on other types of controls. That gave us a basis to get really become experts at those control sets so that we really understood what are the sources of telemetry we can pull from that, how to optimize those control sets, how we can leverage them from enforcing policy. So the mix for us of picking a few really best practice processes and targeting them with using the Microsoft control set, complementing that with a few pieces where Microsoft doesn't have the right piece. Like we happen to be experts from our heritage of the network instrumentation. So we do a lot of work on network detection and response. That's how we've managed to do this. Doing this on your own requires some of the same work. And that's where a lot of organizations that don't have the experts on this in-house struggle with building these playbooks. And so it really becomes a question of, am I going to start hiring experts at this type of thing to be full-time, which is a challenge? Do I bring a consulting organization to help me think about these playbooks? Or candidly, can I actually take these processes as a service? Can I actually have a platform in the cloud that allows me to connect to my, in this case, Microsoft controls, so I can run these missions and have some experts on the back end when needed to look at it and to insert themselves? And that's to me what is reshaping MDR. That's what's reshaping managed detection and response, is this approach to a platform for running these types of best practice processes.
Okay.
So it looks like we've received the ends of the questions.
Yeah.
I hope that's been helpful to everyone. And this really is a fascinating topic, which I'm sure we'll all continue to learn from. It would be and my absolute pleasure to help in any way they can, as you all are going through your journey on this. So please, we'd love to hear from you. And we hope you enjoy the white paper we're sending out, but please do keep in touch and let us know if we can ever help on it. And I wish everyone a safe and healthy journey for the rest of the year.
Yeah, indeed. Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks. So just a quick reminder that this has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, you can go back and watch it again. We'll send an email with instructions for accessing the webinar on demand. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. All right, so now it is time for us to announce the winners of our Amazon gift card drawing. And those winners today are Paul P. Congratulations, Paul. Lucy C. Congratulations, Lucy. Stan T. Congratulations, Stan. And Richard B. So congratulations to all of our winners there. We will send you a separate email with instructions for claiming your gift card. Keep an eye on your inbox for that. And if you don't see it there, make sure and check your spam folder. So again, thanks to everyone for attending. Thank you, Tom, for the awesome presentation and conversation. And we hope to see everyone again at another webinar soon. I am Sharon Florentine, signing off.